Welcome to Satsang. It's so beautiful to be here together. We'll start as always with a question that's come in advance from our online audience. Those joining us from around the world who unfortunately can't be with us physically here, so they send in questions on social media or email. So we'll start with one of their questions and then open it up to any questions that anyone here might have. I feel that I am an extrovert. It makes me an open book. How do I control my emotions? Okay. So, first of all, being an extrovert, it's not actually an emotional thing. Being an extrovert versus being an introvert is something separate. I'll mention it quickly just because the questioner used the word. But then we'll come to what I think the real core aspect has to do with is this: how do I control my emotions? So the difference between an introvert and an extrovert isn't actually about emotions. It's about energy. So an introvert gets their energy, feels the most energized when they are alone, or maybe with just one other person, or in a much smaller, contained, quieter social interaction. People who are extroverts tend to get their energy from, be very energized by lots of people and social interactions. So if introverts are around a lot of people for a long time, they'll start to feel a sense of an energy drain and need to go within. Extroverts are the opposite. Put them alone for too long, and they start to feel this sense of like, oh my God, I've got to go out. You know, we saw this a lot in COVID. People just feeling like I'm going crazy inside. I don't care if I end up dying from it, but for God's sakes, get me into a social situation. And then you saw people who were more introverts feeling like it's such a global tragedy, and I'm actually loving this so much because it's really quite a perfect situation for me. So that's really what extrovert and introvert means. Being an open book and this control of emotions has to do with the inability to use your free will, to use your discipline, to use your intellect, your buddhi that we would say, in order to consciously choose how to act and what to say. So if I get angry, for example, something happens and it triggers anger in me, if I have no control over that, I'm going to scream, I'm going to shout, maybe I'm going to punch my hand through a wall. That's kind of an open book. Nobody's going to doubt, oh my God, she's really angry. Or if I feel really hurt about something, if something really hurts my feelings, I might immediately burst into tears, or I might respond or react in such a way that makes it very obvious that I've been hurt by what happens. Now, learning to control your emotions is not so much something with the end goal of just, I shouldn't be an open book, people shouldn't know how I feel, but it's much more internal. The reason to learn to work with your emotions is not just so people won't know how you feel, but it's much deeper. It's because otherwise our emotions control us. If I'm in the midst of anger, for example, it means I'm unconscious. Anger arises in unconsciousness. So if I say to you right now, okay, everybody close your eyes. You've got 30 seconds to make yourself furious. Just get really inside, really, really, really super furious, angry. Okay, open your eyes. Could you do it? Could you get absolutely like heart pumping, blood pressure rising, sweaty palms, furious? No, right? Now, I do imagine you could think about something that made you angry or remember something that made you angry, but you can't get that heart-pumping, sweaty palms fury that we actually get when we're angry because it arises only in unconsciousness. So if I'm consciously trying to do what I can't, and that's why so frequently when we're angry, we end up saying things and doing things that we later regret, and we say, oh my God, I'm so sorry, that wasn't me. Forgive me, I don't know what happened to me. Well, all that happened was you went unconscious. You lost your presence. You lost the awareness. You lost the mindfulness in the moment. And so the way to work with emotions is to be present. It doesn't mean that you become flat and empty and nothing impacts you. But it means that you don't lose yourself in reaction. That unconscious reaction arises out of habit and pattern. Over my lifetime, I've developed a habit, a pattern, that this thing makes me irate. I mean, I'm just furious. I get so angry. So every time that happens, I yell. Now I don't even have to think about it anymore. It's a trigger response, stimulus response, immediate reaction. Meaning, I, the one who is aware, I'm not present. I've become like Pavlov's dogs. I've become like just a stimulus response mechanism. But the whole point of human life is to be conscious, to recognize that we are not just stimulus response mechanisms, to realize that we are not like light bulbs that get switched on and off at the whim of people around us or the universe around us. But to actually be able to say, anger, interesting. And to decide how to act. There may be times, especially as parents or as teachers, where you have to bring anger and show it. If you've ever tried to train even a puppy dog, you learn that certain tones of voices work to train the puppy in certain ways. You've got to bring sometimes kind of an angry tone of voice in order to get whoever you're teaching to stop, take you seriously. Learn that lesson. But you're not angry in a way where you've lost yourself. You've consciously, purposely brought that demonstration so that the person you're talking to understands she's serious. This is no joke. This really is my last chance. But you don't lose consciousness. And so this is where our meditation practices, our spiritual practices, our contemplation, our introspection comes in. It's where practices around mindfulness and awareness come in. So that somebody can do something and you will see an emotion start to arise. But then you have a choice. My favorite way of thinking about this is, to tell yourself stories. And my favorite example is if you imagine that you're driving down the highway and somebody cuts in front of your car, super fast, super dangerously, and you have to slam on the brakes immediately. Well, with the heart rate going in that moment, a lot of us have a reaction of, you idiot, or you this, or you that. We want to scream, we want to yell, we lose ourselves. Our heart rates are up, we're super angry. But if in that moment instead, you just tell yourself a story. Think of it like a creative writing workshop. You don't know the guy, you don't know why they cut in front of you. Make up a story. Imagine that 3 minutes ago, that guy got a phone call that told him that his son had been in a terrible accident and was at such and such a hospital, and if he didn't show up in the next 5 minutes, he wasn't going to see his son alive. You see how it changes your felt sense experience inside? You see how immediately, it doesn't even take 5 seconds, and you go from feeling like the victim, that person is the aggressor, that person is the idiot, you are somehow this victim of somebody being a horrible person who almost killed you, to suddenly you want to clear the freeway for this person. You want to follow them to the hospital. You want to do whatever you can to help them. Suddenly compassion and love and patience and oneness are flowing through you. So one of the beautiful ways of working with our emotions is to just tell yourself stories. Now you may say, well, that's not true. Maybe he didn't get that phone call. Maybe he is just an idiot. Doesn't matter. Because your emotion has nothing to do with him. Your emotion has to do with you. And so you need to tell yourself whatever story you need to tell to allow yourself to overcome whatever you're going through. We've all been in a situation where someone at work, for example, or someone in our friends circle, or, a waitress in a restaurant, or someone is just really seemingly unreasonably rude to us, obnoxious to us, mean to us. And again, immediately the mind gets into anger, resentment, sometimes worse. Just tell yourself a story. Maybe she's in the middle of a divorce. Maybe her mother or her father or her husband or her child has just gotten a terminal diagnosis. Maybe she's gotten a terminal diagnosis. You have no idea what's going on in her life. And the truth is, for as far as your emotional health, it doesn't actually matter. Because what I promise you is whatever she's got going on is the reason that she was mean and obnoxious to you. Whether it's a story that you write or a completely different story, it doesn't matter. There's a story in that person's mind that is the reason they've acted the way they acted. And it doesn't matter whether you know the real story or not. What matters is that you tell yourself a story that enables compassion to flow in your heart instead of anger, or instead of pain, instead of resentment. So just become a really good fiction writer. As you move through the world, someone is mean, write a story about it. Why are they mean? What just happened to them? What's going on in their life? As you move through the world, just write stories. Because there's always a story, and in most cases you don't know about it. Your colleague doesn't come up and say, hey, I'm so sorry for being so mean, I'm in the middle of a divorce. Or my husband and I had a horrible fight this morning. I'm so sorry, he's cheating on me. Usually people don't open up their hearts like that, so you never actually know what the story is. But I promise you there's a story. And so don't think about controlling your emotions just so that people don't know how you're thinking or feeling. It's a very minor goal. A much bigger goal is to learn to work with your emotions so that they stop controlling you. So you stop being a victim of this stimulus response mechanism or this reactive mechanism, and that you're able to actually stay anchored and grounded in compassion, in love, in oneness, in every moment. So just move through your life writing stories. You'll find that compassion flows through you a lot more. Other questions? Anyone here? Yeah, just come up. There's a microphone right there.
My question is around...
I'm not sure if your mic is on. Okay.
My question is around kundalini yoga.
Wonderful.
How often you should practice kundalini yoga? What is the proper method of doing it? And once the kundalini is aroused, how do you know that you got it? And how do you instill this practice into young people that you know that are more interested in football or some other things, parties and happy hours, things of the nature? Thank you.
Beautiful. So Kundalini Yoga is two things. Let's go back. Kundalini is an energy. There's a lot of energies in our body. We don't have just a physical body. We actually have what are known as 5 sheaths, the Panch Koshas. And I'm not going to go into all of the depth of that because that becomes a lecture in and of itself. But we have, in addition to the Annamaya Kosha, this physical body that's made up literally of food and of substance, we have the Pranamaya Kosha, which is the body that is made up of prana, energy. But even within the physical body, we also have flow of energy within the physical body as well, because none of these bodies is separate. So the mental, the intellectual, the cosmic, it's not that they're somehow 5 separate, parallel, untouching bodies. They all interweave together. So even in the physical body, we have flows of energy. The Kundalini is an energy that is said to be, before it's awakened, curled up like a snake at the bottom of the spine. And when it arises, It flows through the body. Now, yoga in general, any form of yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raj Yoga, all forms of yoga work with kundalini. All forms of yoga awaken kundalini. The grace of the Guru awakens kundalini. A bath in Mother Ganga can awaken kundalini. The awakening of kundalini existed long before it was codified into a specific stream of yoga called Kundalini Yoga. Today, when you speak about Kundalini Yoga in the world of different fields and streams of yoga, it's one of the streams that is particularly focused on arising the Kundalini energy through practices of asana, through practices of breath, through practices of kriya, through practices of mudra, through a lot of different practices to awaken that energy. How frequently should you practice it? Well, like all yoga, you should practice it 24 hours a day. Now, if what you mean is how frequently should I practice the asanas, different people have different practices. A few times a week at least, ideally. If you can do it every day, fantastic. I would say a kind of as much as you can vision of it. But like yoga in general and the streams of fullness of yoga, Kundalini Yoga is not only asanas, it's not only seated, eyes closed or eyes open breath practices or kriyas or mudras or other practices. It's how you live. If you take the 8 limbs of yoga that Patanjali gave us, Ashtanga Yoga, kind of the basis for so much of yoga today. Well, long before you get to asana at limb 3, you've got yam and niyam of limb 1 and 2. So practice of nonviolence is yoga. And yoga is the practice of nonviolence. It's both ways. Practice of truthfulness, practice of not stealing or hoarding is yoga. And yoga is a practice of those things. I don't care how long you can stand on your head or how many times you can go up and down in frog pose. If you're not living a life of truthfulness and nonviolence and dharma and integrity, it's not yoga. It's exercise, it's acrobatics, it's calisthenics, it's any one of so many other forms of keeping the body in shape. But it's not yoga. So Kundalini Yoga is a way of working with an energy in the body that is with you all the time. When you lie, when you steal, when you harm, when you act in ways that are not in integrity with your highest truth, with cosmic truth, you are pushing that energy back down. So for you to engage in a practice on a mat, on a cushion, to awaken and arise an energy that you then go out and dampen down, seems like a colossal waste of time. And that's why yoga practice and real yoga teachers who are not just exercise instructors give us teachings around how we live, teachings around yam and niyam, teachings around this truth of our unity, our oneness. So practice Kundalini Yoga 24 hours a day. You may not be able to consciously practice it while you're sleeping, but practice it as you fall asleep. Anchor in that energy. Fall asleep chanting a mantra. Wake up chanting a mantra. Wake up in love, in gratitude. I know several Kundalini Yoga instructors, and one of the things that they teach is make sure you are up before the sun. So you want to practice Kundalini Yoga throughout the day. Every time you're up before the sun, well, you're practicing your Kundalini Yoga. Get into a cold shower. You're practicing the teachings of Kundalini Yoga. So if you are really committed to living yoga, not just to becoming more flexible or limber or strong in the body, there are actually ways to practice it all day long. And then how do you know when it's been awakened? You know, Puja Swamiji always says, when you become enlightened or awakened, it's not like you grow horns. It's not like somehow from far away people can say, oh yeah, that person, the one with the horns on their head. But you feel it inside. I would say that as long as you're wondering if you are, probably you are not. I don't know any enlightened master who's not quite sure if they're enlightened or not. But along the way, the beautiful thing with our spiritual practices, it's not all or nothing. It's not like you're nowhere, you're nowhere, you're nowhere, you're nowhere, you're nowhere, you're nowhere, and then finally you get there. The more you practice, the closer and closer and closer you get, and the more and more moments of your day are spent in wakefulness, in connection, in truth, in presence. And so a good way to know along the way is, how frequently do I lose myself? How frequently do I find myself saying things, doing things, acting in ways that I later say, oh my God, what was I doing? What a stupid thing to say. That was so wrong. Why did I act like that? The more that things like that happen to you, the more opportunity you have to keep practicing. And the fewer and fewer situations where that happens, it means you're more and more conscious. You're more and more present. The easier it is for you to love others, to love yourself, to be in compassion in every minute, the closer and closer you're getting. The more precious and sacred all of the creation seems to you because you see it infused by the presence of the Creator, the closer and closer you're getting. So don't worry about it. It's not like a finish line that you've got to race toward. But just keep moving, keep walking, keep doing the yoga. It'll happen. Sure.
I always put myself in needy person and who need help.
Maybe you can lower the microphone a little bit.
I always put myself in needy person or like poor person, and then I got cry or I always help them. So how can I stop? Sometimes they take my advantage.
Sometimes?
Yeah.
No, say the last part again.
Sometimes they take my advantage.
Okay. So there's a difference between feeling compassion and love and letting yourself be taken advantage of. Spirituality does not mean we become a doormat. भैया इसको बढ़ा दो साउंड थोड़ा सा ना, बढ़ा दो, मुझे जोर से बोलना पड़ेगा फिर गला खराब हो रहा है. धन्यवाद. Being spiritual and having compassion, it doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It doesn't mean that you get taken advantage of. We're able to have compassion and presence with another being, but also to have compassion and presence with us, ourselves. It also doesn't mean that you leave your common sense at the door. There's a lot of people in this world who need a lot. There's a lot of anguish and pain and hunger and homelessness and so much in this world. And each of us can do only as much as we can do. But it's important to allow your compassion and your common sense to function together side by side. And they might not necessarily overlap. So your compassion might enable you to feel love for that person, to feel compassion for that person, to feel in their shoes fully, empathy even for that person. But your common sense might come in and say, but acting in this way is not actually going to help them. Because there's a lot of reasons that people find themselves in difficult situations. And sometimes there's actually an important lesson for them in that situation. And so we do as much as we can, in as many circumstances as we can, but you also have compassion for yourself. And you recognize that being taken advantage of means that that person may not necessarily be the best recipient of your actual actions of compassion, or you may decide that you're going to keep giving and doing, and if somebody takes advantage, that's their karmic package. They've got to deal with it. My yoga teacher back in America, I remember, this is going back 30 years at least, and he was doing a yoga full-day retreat. And at lunch, we would walk to, this was in Los Angeles, and we would walk to a nearby health food store and get juices and things like that. You couldn't eat much because you were going to go back into a yoga class, but juices and protein bars and whatnot. And one of the times I had forgotten my wallet back at the yoga studio. And so he bought me a juice or a protein bar, or whatever it was. And I said, oh, thank you so much. I'll pay you back as soon as we get back to the studio. And he looked at me and he said, that's your karma. And this was long before I had come to India, long before I even really knew much of what it meant. And he said, I decided a long time ago that I was only going to spend my brain energy on remembering what I owed other people, not what they owed me. Because my karmic due is to make sure that I pay back somebody if I've taken something from them. If I owe someone something, I have to give it back to them. But if someone owes me something, that's up to them to remember. And so, depending on how you're being taken advantage of, you may decide, chalo, my role, like that story of the saint and the scorpion. You may decide it is my dharma to help. And if it is this person's dharma to sting me, so be it. I'm going to keep helping them. But you may also decide that the reason you're getting stung, the reason you're getting taken advantage of, is not so much because of your pure compassion or pure dharma, but because for some other reason you keep allowing yourself to be taken advantage of. And that it's not actually compassion, and it's not actually dharma, but maybe there's some other, something going on in your relationship with certain people. It may be something as simple as being a people pleaser. I really want people to like me, so whatever they want, I'm going to give to them because I want them to like me. And when people realize that you're like that, they will absolutely take advantage of you. हाँ वो तो जरूर करेगी. बस पूछना है वो तो जरूर करेगी. Because they know कि आप नहीं कभी नहीं बोलेंगे. But that's actually something for you to work through. Because allowing yourself to be taken advantage of just because you don't say no, just because you're afraid that people might not like you or that they would get upset with you, that would be an important thing to work with. So you know yourself. Ask yourself deeply, which of these situations is it? And then decide how you're going to respond accordingly. Because just because people are going to betray you doesn't mean that you stop trusting and close your heart. And you still want to make sure to have your common sense. So it's that parallel journey of both of them. Beautiful. Yeah. Other questions? We'll just switch over to this side for a moment. Yes.
Thank you. Pranam Sadhviji.
Pranam.
My question is, what is the best way to be connected, attached with the family members if everybody or a family of 6 and 2 of each are in different countries?
So the best way to stay connected to them? The best way to stay connected to them? Just clarifying, the best way, you're looking for the best way to stay connected when you're in different countries. And attached. Well, attached can be a bit of an ambiguous word because attachment isn't necessarily something we want to cultivate. Connection we want to cultivate. Attachment can end up being something that's not so helpful for us. Even whether somebody's in the same room or whether they're in another country. But connection, the deepest connection is that in the soul. You know, Puja Swamiji frequently makes fun in a light-hearted, very loving and sweet way, but I've heard him do it many times, makes fun of those of us from the Western culture where we keep saying, I love you, to loved ones. Oh, I love you. Oh, he didn't say he loves me today. Oh, you didn't say this to me today. And I've heard him counsel so many people. He says, our culture is not like that. We don't keep saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. We know you love them. You don't have to give somebody a Hallmark card every day. You don't have to remember to say it at the end of every single phone call. You don't have to do those things that so many of us from other cultures or today's more Western-influenced Indian culture does. He says we know that love is there. We feel that oneness. Even you don't talk, even you don't say I love you, even you don't. Because inevitably these days there's a lot of conflicts between like one person who says, oh, he never says he loves me, or she never does this, and the other one who says, but I love them. Like, why do they need to hear it every day? And it's really a bit of just a cultural difference. But I would say whether you choose to say it every day or not, ultimately the depth of the connection is what's important. Because what we've all experienced is being in a situation with someone who says, I love you, but you know they don't feel it, and it has no meaning. It's much better to be with someone who doesn't say it but who feels it than someone who says it but doesn't feel it. And so that connection needs to be a connection in love. There should not be an attachment to, we must talk once a day. I mean, I know people, parents and children. Kids are in another country and the parents get upset if the kids don't call them once a day or text them once a day. To me, that's the downside of mobile phones. I mean, I grew up with really, really overprotective parents. But once a week was kind of what the normal was when I went off to college. I didn't know anybody who talked to their parents more than once a week. Now, parents and their children are back and forth 50 times a day, and if the parents don't get a response in 6 minutes, they're ready to call the police. What happened? Oh my God, kuch garbad ho gaya. So depending on which part of the family is where, focus on the connection that's in the heart and not be so necessarily dependent, especially if it's a younger generation that's in another country that's exploring and learning and growing, not being so attached to them constantly sending you, 7 a.m. every day a WhatsApp message, 9 p.m. every night WhatsApp message. Like, just hold the connection inside, knowing that it's there, but not being quite so demanding on the time. And of course, if it's not the younger generation, if it's siblings, then you'll work out what the best way of communication is. But the point is, a phone call does not make a relationship, and an absence of a phone call does not break a relationship. We have to make sure that we're not losing content for form. We all have lots of people we talk to every day with whom you're not necessarily that deeply connected. But maybe you need to get some work done from them. Maybe it's somebody in the office place. Maybe it's the person who serves you coffee at the coffee shop. The frequency of communication does not determine at all the depth of the connection. And in the same way, the infrequency of the connection or the communication does not say anything again about the depth of the connection. So make sure that you're really focused on content rather than form. And then you'll figure out between you what works best in terms of the form. Is it once a day? Is it once a week? Is it a FaceTime? Is it just a text message? You'll figure it out. The much more important thing is the depth of the actual connection. The rest is just the expression of that. Focus on the depth. The depth is there regardless of where someone is. You think back to, World War I, World War II, when people were gone for any war that took place before 20 years ago. Soldiers would go off for years. There were no phones. There was no text messaging. There was no email. There was nothing. There was no way even to know someone was still alive. And then they'd come back a few years later, or you think about explorers even, not just soldiers, but explorers. People would go off. They'd come back a few years later. But that connection was still there. They hadn't spoken once in years. But the connection hadn't gotten less. So we need to be much more focused on the depth of the connection than just the expression of the communication. Beautiful. Thank you. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your evening. A beautiful day to our family joining us from all over the world. And I look so forward to being together with you all again tomorrow. And so much love to you.